Hello and welcome to the first video of the How to Reinhardt series. This series will cover everything from the basics of everyone's beloved Crusader to how some of the top players tackled the most nuanced aspects of the character. Over the course of the next few months, I hope to improve your Rein gameplay through all kinds of advice. I've been playing this character for almost 4 years now. I started playing in 2018 and throughout that time I've gotten through Grandmaster. I've been one of the top 100 Rein players on Overbuff, and I've played recently for a collegiate team, so I have plenty of experience on this character with over, I would say, about 200 hours on this character. And he's been my main for multiple years now, and I felt like the least I could do is try to reach out to the community a little bit and let some people know who are new to the game, maybe they're wanting to brush up on some skills. How exactly do you play Reinhardt? Without further ado, let's get into this video. It's a nice short basic one over the character's abilities and just some general tips I have for you guys. Alright, so for the first ability on Reinhardt, we're going to have the Rocket Hammer. Pretty straightforward, swinging the hammer, 85 damage. Nice little back and forth, left to right action there. As for his primary ability, it's going to be the Fire Strike. It's not listed as the primary ability, but I would call it that. It's got 2 charges, 6-second cooldown, 100 damage. As you can see, it just fires out a thin projectile you can shoot just about anywhere. Secondary ability is going to be the Charge, 125 damage when you pin an enemy into the wall. If you bump into them and don't pin them, it does 50 damage, and this is on a 7-second cooldown. It has a lot of mobility with it, so you can steer left and right. You can pin an enemy into the wall. You can only pin one enemy at a time, so you got to pick your targets wisely. And then for the ultimate ability, we'll come back to that, but now we're going to take a look at the third ability, which is going to be the Barrier Shield. This normally has 1200 HP, I just kind of screwed up with the custom game. It has no cooldown, and as you can see, I'm moving it all around. And I can pop it off and on as much as I want. It has no cooldown. And then finally, we're going to have the ultimate Earth Shatter. It's just a cone of damage. If you get hit by it, it does 50 damage, and you'll be stunned to the ground for almost 3 seconds. Another cool thing about Earth Shatter is that up close, you can do an extra 120 damage and still get that stun. So I'm going to start out the analytical bit of this series with just 3 basic top tips for Rein. My first tip is pretty simple. It's just to manage your shield. Just because you have a 1200 HP shield doesn't mean you should use it up all at once. This means that you want to use it just kind of every once in a while to block high instances of damage, like maybe a Hanzo or a Widow shot. And then you also want to use it to mitigate stuns like Sigma's Rock or Roadhog's Hook. And then status effects like Ana Sleep and Biotic Grenade, or maybe even Maze Freeze, something like that. You want to use it every once in a while for those small moments where if you get hit by something or your team gets hit by something, the team fight is going to change drastically as a result. And that brings me into my second main point, which is going to be keep track of where your teammates are. Obviously, you can't have eyes in the back of your head, and turning around in the middle of a team fight is a bit risky, but if you're too split from your team, you will get picked off very easily. Rein's only mobility is his charge, and honestly, if you're stuck in the enemy backline, chances are you're not going to have the time to do a 180 and pin out of there. So, the best way to keep track of this is, before the team fight starts, take a look at where your team is, see where they're set up, and play around them. And then try not to get too split from your team by creating a way in which the enemies are not in between yourself and your team, because once you get cut off, you are most likely going to die. Another great way that you'll learn to understand how to stay with your team is going to be through trust. And while you get different players in your game every single time you play, you're eventually going to understand how people play in certain scenarios, and with time you'll learn where the ideal positioning is in any certain team fight. And my third and final point is going to be a leader. This to me is the most important point. It's really at the core of how you play Reinhardt. You will struggle to win games if you ever sit back and play at the will of your teammates, because you're the lone tank. The rules have changed for Overwatch 2, there's no more 2 tanks. You are the individual tank. This means that you provide a lot of utility through your kit, and you are kind of the star of the team. This means that you can do what is called making space, which is the act of moving the enemies back so that your team can fill in that area, that space. Your shield's a great way to do this, your charge, your fire strike, even just walking towards the enemy sometimes can be enough to convince them to back away and give you the space. You control the tempo, and thus you are the leader in that sense. If you're comfortable with talking to your team, I'd really recommend doing it. But if you're like me and you don't really dabble in the team voice chat, I totally get it. Pings are a great way to do it. You can even use like group up, going in, stuff like that, just on the chat wheel. But at the end of the day, if you're just going to sit back and let your DPS and supports try to call the shots and run the show, you're going to find that the enemy tank is just going to have a field day and you're going to be completely lost out there. So do what you can to stay on top of things. You're the leader. Act like it. And with that, you now understand the basics of playing Reinhardt and what to focus on in your games. If you're new, now's a great time to queue up for some unrated and try out what you've learned. But if you're a veteran like myself, maybe you didn't learn something new. That's all good. If you didn't, don't worry. There will definitely be stuff you'll appreciate as the series progresses. As always, thank you for the support, and I'll see you in the next video.